second. This is already screwing up here. Oh, wait, are we live right now? Oh, God. The Comic Binge presents a sub-series dedicated to one of the most divisive and imaginative mainstream comic book runs ever created with an iconic character. This is Knights Never Die, Grant Morrison's Batman, issue by issue. Hello! Welcome back to Knights Never Die, a sub-series of the Comic Binge. Very pleased to bring this series back to you. It's been an eventful period of time since the last time we all got together, but we got a pretty fun issue to talk about here. Maybe not as eventful as some other issues that we have discussed so far, but maybe depending on how deeply you want to dive into things. I'm Comic Binge co-host Chris Clow, and we return tonight with, I think it's safe to say, a far more conventional issue in this ongoing run by writer Grant Morrison, but that doesn't exactly make it a typical reading experience either. We're now on a more visible road ahead to the next major story in the run, but we've got about 10 really fascinating single issues to discuss before we get there, or 11, I guess, total. Tonight, I'm joined once more by my partner in crime fighting, from The Flash Up to Speed with Wally West, reviewer extraordinaire at Batman on Film, Mr. Javi Trujillo. Javi, how you doing, my friend?
That's a loaded question right now. I'm going to
Sure.
take the fifth, given current events.
No problem. Understandable. Well,
yeah.
please.
No. I was going to say, in addition to all that, recently launched a podcast called the 007 Files with Bill Koenig of the Spy Command and David Lee from the James Bond dossier, which, I don't know, kind of ties into today's episode a little bit.
In a fun way.
Yeah,
definitely. Oh, that's cool, man. How many episodes have you guys done?
I think 5. The 5th one just came out this week.
Cool.
So
what
another
was the most recent topic?
GoldenEye, but not the movie, the resort, the home
cool.
of James Bond, where Fleming lived. It's been a resort for a while now, and David interviewed someone who's been there twice in the last 2 years, and he just kind of details his experiences and, away from like the brochure part of it, like this is what we did and this is what you can expect, and, give you like a real feel for if you decide to go there someday. So, and it's definitely on one of my bucket list destinations.
That's is it Jamaica?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I'm remembering right, and please correct me if I'm wrong, isn't that near one of the shooting locations for Dr. No?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah, they filmed parts of Dr. No, Live and Let Die, and No Time to Die in Jamaica.
That's cool. Yeah.
And Laughing Waters, where they filmed Ursula Andress coming out of the water, is nearby Fleming's estate.
That's what I want to see.
Yeah.
I want to see those little waterfalls because that looks like a pretty great spot to hang out for a day. That's for sure. Well, before we jump into this issue, I did want to ask you briefly, because it sounds like you have begun another interactive Batman-oriented experience.
Yeah, I did. I did today. It's been sitting on my hard drive for a while, so I finally plugged into Gotham Knights. Unfortunately, I got called into work yesterday, so when I went to actually start playing it today, I started falling asleep, like, not too
No.
long after the cutscene.
Yeah.
So, I'm probably gonna get back to it later tonight, but, and what an opening that was. I wasn't expecting that, and, try not to spoil a two-year-old game. Uh, it went I thought maybe certain things would be open-ended from the jump, like, for later,
Sure.
but that was not the case. I was like, "Oh, okay, we're leaning into this."
This is the
So,
world. Yeah.
yeah. So, I started off, I just went with Babs first. I was gonna go with Dick, but no, I wound up going with Batgirl instead,
Interesting.
just to
I
trick it up.
I thought you'd jump straight into Tim Drake.
I thought so too, but I didn't.
All right. Yeah.
It's just kinda how the cursor fell, and I was like, "Eh, okay."
Yeah,
'Cause
sure.
you can trick them up, right, throughout the game, or you're
Yeah.
forced to play as different people?
You're encouraged to alternate. I mean, you don't have to, I don't think. I don't think it forces you to, but you can certainly, play different segments as different characters. You get different dialogue based on their interactions with characters in different scenes. You get different items and can craft different costumes and weapons for them. Um, so it's a good idea to switch it up occasionally if you want to level everybody up. But
Yeah.
yeah, that opening cutscene, that certainly surprised the hell out of me the first time, I played it. We'll have to jump on sometime because you can do some co-op stuff in there, which is pretty it's a fun feature. I did a little bit with Ryan Haas.
Yeah,
Uh,
I listened to that podcast you guys did where you talked about
oh,
it.
okay, yeah.
Did you play with Micah too?
I
With
never
Micah
got to play
Ramey?
with Micah. I
Okay.
mean, he and I are friends on PSN, but we just never connected. Different time zones, I think, but I mean,
Yeah.
that hasn't stopped us for tagging up on Suicide Squad a couple of times. But, yeah, man. Well, cool. Well, keep me updated with how things go. And just as a reminder to folks, so we are still in Act One of Knights Never Die, which is Knight versus Glove. We are in the little second segment there in Batman number 664. So we got a ways to go before we're done with Act One, but things are kind of starting to amp up a bit here, and we are expecting, I think, uh, an appearance from Mr. Paul Herman at some point this evening, but he's a little under pressure right now from other things, so he'll join us when he can. But yeah, today we're going to be diving into Batman Volume One, number 664. Let me see. Do we have? Yes, here we
We
go.
sure do.
There it is. Batman number 664 released on March 28th in 2007 with a cover date of May. The issue was, of course, written by Grant Morrison and features the return of both cover and interior artists Andy Kubert on pencils, Jesse Delberdang on inks, and Guy Major on colors. So a bit of a return to form, you might say,
I
from the
think so.
last issue, certainly. Hopefully, to Paul's infinite delight, we're getting the return to form here. Uh, if you haven't watched our episode of Batman 663, The Clown at Midnight, you totally should, because we're kind of all over the place in terms of our perspectives on that issue. And it was a fun time. So be sure to go back and watch that one if you have not yet, and if you're following along with Knights Never Die. Here's the solicitation distributed by DC in December of 2006. It says the Dark Knight discovers a cover up that could change his relationship with the Gotham Police Department as Grant Morrison, Andy Kubert, and Jesse Delperdang continue their landmark run on Batman. A routine investigation into police corruption leads to a terrifying confrontation with a monstrous menace that threatens to end Batman's career. Um, Something that immediately comes to mind with that solicitation is that that's kind of the whole issue. There's It
Yeah.
it it does a pretty good job of kinda laying out everything that really happens. I mean, when you get down into the details, that's when, you can start to mine for additional, material in the narrative and its place in the overarching run that we're experiencing right now, but there's not a lot of, I guess, mechanical components to this issue in terms of what it has to drive forward and what it chooses to emphasize. But plot wise, that's a reasonably complete description. But character wise, there are some things that I know that we'll dive into. This is a little bit of a slower issue in comparison to the other ones that we've covered, at least in the sense of moving the wider narrative along. It's actually a very brisk read. I mean, at least it is for me. I tend to blow through this one pretty quickly myself. Even when I'm kind of slowing down and trying to take in the details of the pages and the graffiti on the walls. But
Hmm.
it's virtually all set up. It's the really basic preliminaries for the rest of the first act of the run are out of the way by this point. Damien has been established. The Joker was nearly killed at the apparent hands of Gotham police officers. Jezebel Jet has made her presence felt, and there's some new weird creepiness that is sneaking in around the edges of the story. And we really get the sense of that certainly by the final few pages of this issue. Um, Javi, while we're waiting for Paul to jump in, um, how do you before you actually get to your impressions at the time that you read it, how do you kind of see this issue fitting into the run now, having recently reabsorbed it?
I mean, it's one of my favorites actually. Um, like this whole like little I don't know, it's like a mini arc, but it's not like defined by, part 1 of 3 or anything like that. It doesn't have a general title. And in fact, it's like collected in like the black case book. Um, and it feels very old school comic because of that. Like we're not like it's telling a continuing story, but it doesn't feel like its own contained graphic novel. And I don't know, especially after the last issue, um, which, like I mentioned before, is like it's such a I don't want to say slog, but it's so time consuming. And it kind of grinds, like I said last time, like it just kind of grinds the momentum of reading the comic to a halt because it's so verbose, because it is more book with images than a comic book. And then you like hit the gas again once you get right on this page. And I like how um like we kind of like the events happened, but between the clown story and the fill-in 4 issues, like I like how they open this up with Gibraltar basically at the end of the first arc to kind of remind you again of where we've been and then picking up from there. And just Kubert, man. I just pencils are just next level
Mm.
stuff.
Yeah, yeah. He's on a whole other level. I mean, as people probably glimpsed from our last discussion, I'm not someone who dislikes The Clown at Midnight, but I mean there is something to be said for getting back to this particular vision of this particular version of the world. And yeah, I mean this Andy Kubert, I think, drew maybe one of my all-time favorite pages in the run in this issue, and it's not even anything super significant as much as just extraordinarily atmospheric. And yeah, it's this one here. Um, it's a very abrupt transition because in the previous page to this, Batman or Bruce and Jezebel are at a restaurant not far from the ski resort that they're at in France, where he makes this rather surprising statement about his defining tragedy. And I love the way that the pencils are on his face here. It's almost the pencils give it even a more definition right here on the "I got over it" than than it does at full finished inks. I just love that. The light seems so real on the
Yeah.
pencils alone. Not that the inks take away from it. The inks are great, but there is something about this just raw acumen that Kubert has with playing the light off of the shadows that I just really appreciate. But that page with Batman standing against a very Blade Runner esque neon ad for the L Pod from Luther Industries.
Yeah,
Uh,
that was a nice touch.
but it's just like everything about this page is on point. The oppressiveness of the rain just looks like it's sloppy and gross and warm in a way. And then the cape fluttering, the shadow, the silhouette. There's nothing about this page I don't like. I feel like this is very much like a definitive Batman page, even though for all intents and purposes it's just a transition. But
Man, that is a
so
page I would love to own.
oh my god, I shudder to think
Oh,
what
yeah,
what the cost on something like that would be. I'm sure that a private collector has that page now. But in the event that they don't, yeah, I mean, if Andy Kubert was ever at a convention and had that one on display, yeah, that would be pretty tempting. Maybe you and I can go halfsies on
there we
it.
go. Split
We'll
time.
just mail it to each other back and forth
Yeah,
across the country and just admire it a couple months out of the year. Um, well, I'll just kind of run through the basic elements of the plot here before we jump into our overall impression. So the issue starts in Gibraltar with Bruce apparently having dispatched Talia's army of man-bats before jetting off to France and meeting Jezebel for a ski trip. Really fun use of one of the ski. What are those called? I'm not a skier. Do you know what they're
ski
called?
lift.
No, not the lift.
Oh,
The
sorry.
the
The
pick
pole.
thing. The pole.
The
Is it
ski,
just a pole?
yeah, ski pole.
Okay. The Batman's deft use of a ski pole to take out what? Oh, hey, Paul. Hey,
Looky
man.
here.
Welcome aboard. Uh, let's see. How can we do? Is that this? That's good. Yeah, this is
That's
good.
good.
Um, but really deft use of a ski pole to take out this unsuspecting paparazzo that he might have thought was an assassin, or maybe he thought it was a paparazzo. It's kind of unclear to me what he was thinking, but he was able to benefit from it by bolstering his reputation as Bruce Wayne right afterward. Um, but he makes a very kind of defined statement about his defining tragedy, but quickly finds himself back in Gotham where his nightly patrol puts him face to face with something truly disturbing. And it's here that the Black Casebook is mentioned in the run for the first time as an apparent document that refers to previous cases that he's taken on. And that switch being flipped in his head makes for a devastating mistake that kind of leaves us hanging at the end of the story. Uh, and I mean, this was, I guess, just contemporaneous first impressions. Paul, I want to go to you first because I assume that this is the first time that you've read this issue. So, first of all, I already know you liked it better than the last one, so don't even bother. Oh, I can't hear you, man.
Because I was muted.
There you go.
The thing is, I probably would have liked anything.
Yeah.
comic
Okay,
related
just
better
this
than the
one,
last
please.
one. So,
What did you
yes.
make? What did you make of this one? Let me tee it up in a particular way. Did anything about
Okay.
this issue lose you in terms of the threads that have already been established in prior issues, or were you able to just kind of go along for the ride and see this for what it is?
Well, part of the charm of what we're doing here is we're going issue by issue, which is very unique compared to what we usually do, which is like we binge a bunch of issues together, so you kind of get more of a narrative and like the broad, the broad strokes, the details you can kind of take in a little bit. This is a little bit different, so you have to kind of like either go back and kind of know what's going on. I have a very broad sense of what's going on. And after The Clown at Midnight, which is admittedly not my favorite thing, that being said, when Andy Kubert comes on, your eyes always kind of are ready to go, right? Yeah, a couple of things. I liked seeing Grant Morrison play with Bruce Wayne as a person, and you got to kind of feel his Bruce Wayne a little bit more. And I liked diving into that world and like using Bruce Wayne as a way to navigate the narrative a little bit, instead of just like Batman and Bruce Wayne being like, Alfred, I'm Batman. Like, like there, I mean, I know there's plenty of Batman stories like this out here, but you get what I'm saying. Like, he's not neglecting Bruce Wayne, which I think with any comic book writer, you're writing superheroes, it's easy to neglect, even though like there's some great runs out there that like I love. I can admit that when like either a Peter Parker or whoever gets a disservice a little bit because the hero is propped up or whatever, what have you, right? So it was nice to see a real emphasis of Bruce Wayne in his element when he's not being Batman Bruce Wayne, he's being the facade Bruce Wayne, right? So I really like that aspect of it, and seeing and I'm sorry, Kubert's art is just, it's great. It's so good. I texted you guys. You know the double splash page for me, Javi. I'm sure you brought it out for us. Yes, that one. That is just chef's kiss. I texted you guys out when we read it the next day. I thought this is a beautiful, beautiful layout. Just so good. Yeah, I liked seeing what we're getting with Bruce Wayne here. The one thing, it's so funny you bring up the Black Case book, Chris, because as I'm reading this, I was like, is this the first time? I'm like, is this the first time the Black Case book was brought up? I thought maybe I missed it in the previous issues. I was like, huh, that's interesting. I remember I took note of that. Because the Black Case book, he talks about it when he's investigating underground, right? Okay, cool. Because like, I was like, wait a minute, that's weird. One thing, so yeah. Initially, I love this book. It is a fast read, and I a lot of people will, and I myself can be included in this. I don't fault writers and artists for a fast issue. It's when it's on a consistent basis, when it's all we're getting are fast, super like brisk issues. That's why I don't like. That's why I take issue with that. I'm doing a lot of like double entendres, I guess, maybe on this. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to always brisk through things, but I don't want things to be just Silver Age Spider-Man just explain everything to death, right? Like, I want a little bit of a mix, and I like that this issue is kind of something that you can just jump into and briskly read, and you get, I think you get a lot out of it too, right? So yeah, I think Grant Morrison, this is a great example of Grant Morrison knowing the medium, Andy Kubert being a master and a teacher of the art of comic books, which is great. And one last thing I'll say here real quick is I loved how Batman, takes these people out and he's like, go, do something else. And the person's like, I can't read or write, dude. Like, what do you want me to do? And I'm like, I love the fact that Batman's like, gotta get a job. And she's like, I can't do anything else. And I like that he's acknowledging that, like, right. And he's like, here, take this. They're going to hire you, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I just like the fact that like Grant Morrison's bringing that up, that like a lot of people who are in this world aren't just doing it because they're pure evil. They're just kind of like, this easiest way for them to make money because they don't have education, because they were brought up in, not a great situation. So
Oh,
I
what
liked
you're saying
having,
doesn't make any sense. Like Twitter told me specifically that Batman only beats up on mental health people and doesn't help the downtrodden at all.
Well, those people probably are grifters and are on a platform that are probably talking about winning recently and probably trying to be so over the top about it that they're just trying to just rake in that extra dough to pay
Well,
their rent or mortgage. So anyway,
some
but yes,
something piggybacking off of that real fast, something that I think is worth pointing out is that Morrison has spoken a lot in the past about the limitations of superhero storytelling, and particularly the limitations of a character like Batman, who maybe isn't equipped to comment on real world issues like the intersection of poverty and crime. So, in this moment, Morrison kind of communicates that recognition, right? That there
right,
are
right.
these underpinning influences that drive people in a particular direction just to have a livelihood. And and that's why I want to make sure and emphasize the idea that, you know, it's not just completely punitive. And that's something that isn't particularly commonly explored at this point, at least. And Morrison was doing it, and that was cool. So,
And this isn't the last time we see her either.
right, yeah, which
Cool.
will become clear soon enough. So, Javi, why don't you take it? How you talked a little bit about sort of where you see this in the run, but do you remember the first time that you did read this and how you took it then, and how does that compare with the way that you absorb it now?
I really liked it back then because just a James Bond nerd. So seeing, I wouldn't say it's a dig, but Jezebel's line of he says you're cool like James Bond, and Batman's just Bruce's utter confidence. Oh, I'm much cooler than he is. Race you to the lodge is like that got me right then because for me like that set up with this stunning vista of Kubert's like that all to me is just riffing off of The World Is Not Enough, which coincidentally, spoiler for a 25-year-old movie, you think Elektra is a love interest and she winds up being the villain. So like there's a dark side to this character that I like that they kind of fool the audience with. And it kind of raises a question like is Jezebel in this mold or is she just perfectly fit for Bruce? Because she goes on to talk about her parents, how her parents were killed, and they have that common element. They have that common bond, if you will. But I like the homage to that movie, and even when the paparazzi come, there's a scene in The World Is Not Enough where parahawks come and attack them while they're skiing. So not only does this feel very reminiscent of that, but even the helicopters that they're using are very similar to the one that Connery flew in You Only Live Twice. Except now he has the camera on his head as opposed to holding it. So just a lot of fun homages. So from the start, I was completely on board. I think
Are
you're
you
trying to say
telling me
something, Paul.
that there's a Bond and Batman connection?
Oh, there are dozens upon dozens, my friend.
I'm being facetious.
I
So
know you are.
anyway, okay.
But
Anyway,
but it
continue.
it went beyond just that surface level enjoyment because as the run completed, and then I've gone back and reread this several times, like, yeah, there's the obvious, Bane-sized cop with the mask, um, the black casebook mention, but you start to notice all the Zurin R's that are graffitied all over Gotham. Like, it just permeates every single wall, and it didn't mean anything the first time, but going back and rereading it, I mean, it means everything. So It's just this whole run just for me gets better every time I read it. Just like the death of and return to Superman. Like just every time I'm always noticing something new or appreciating it in a different way. And that's what I like about going back to it so much.
Yeah, absolutely. The first time I read this, I honestly don't remember having like overriding impressions of what the story was saying. But as I have revisited this run multiple times in the subsequent years, I really appreciate the cleanliness of this issue, just as like a narrative mechanism that transitions us from everything up to the clown at midnight to pretty much everything afterward. This is really the first kind of domino to fall where admittedly some of the problems that people have with this run as a full construct start to begin happening. Maybe a little bit of the individual eccentricities of the creative team start to assert themselves a little bit more starting here. But that's kind of one of the reasons why I love it because there is this really kind of unsettling uh, environment, demeanor that the issue has as you progress deeper into the story and the way that it culminates in the last page. It's a combination of like brutality, grotesquerie, uh, and just kind of weirdness. Like there's a Batman Bane who might be a police officer.
Yeah,
Uh,
that was to me, I think, a very Lynchian thing to do, if I may, because he's basically taking was he's taking the reality and warping it so much to add that layer of psychedelicness, if you will, that he's really trying to emphasize that everything is not all that it seems, right? Like you're taking like the Batman character, you're putting it in a very ridiculous like the whole concept of like a Bane-ish cop in a Batman costume is just ridiculous on its notion. But in the context of the story, because you've built up like everything with all the the going down in the deep and whatever, and it's in the weird like darkness and everything, and it's just the way he presents it. It's very weird and just like it's so ridiculous, but it's so creepy at the same time that it really adds a layer to it, which again is a very interesting way of doing of trying to get to where I kind of know where he's kind of going with this. At least I think I do, but he does a good job of setting up this world of like realism, and then it becomes surreal right at the very end, and you don't really know where to take it. In the way it's so ridiculous, but it's so based in reality that it seems so off that something's not right here, and that makes it really creepy. Which again, that's great storytelling right there, because on its face value, this is ridiculous and stupid, right? Like if you were to show that to me as like, hey, I have a new character to pitch to you, I'd be like, that's dumb as hell, right? But in the context of the story of how he builds this up, it's super weird, which is great. So I do think it's a great storytelling device is what he's done here. Very Lynchian.
yeah, no, I think that those kinds of comparisons I expect will only accelerate as we progress through the run. I'll be really interested to see how you express yourself on maybe some of those comparisons, particularly after Final Crisis, is just my guess. But we'll see. Um, Javi, are there any particular pages that stand out? You do an impeccable job oh, you do an impeccable job of selecting them for us to take a closer look at. What jumps out at you? What do you think should be highlighted from here?
Well, I wanted to mention like this panel for starters. It's just powerful to begin with. But if you go to the unwrapped edition like this, you get this little note of the panel next to it that says, "Note, this is the actual sound effect used when Bane broke Batman's back. If it doesn't work for you, we can just blacken in the panel." And it's got this cracked, as you can see there. And I love that some of these little things squeak in to the unwrapped editions where you can see some notes and get a little bit of like a behind the scenes. But in addition to like the sweeping vistas that we mentioned, and that great shot of the eyes, and your favorite panel or page rather, like this one with Batman fighting in the alley was just chef's kiss. Especially you've got the big Zur-En-Arrh behind him, and the way that you can see the hands moving as he's like getting the batarangs out, like it's just Batman at his best, and it really popped out to me of sequential storytelling.
Dude, the bottom panel is I think it's just beautiful. It's so good. That is just chef's kiss, man. Woo.
Like he's kind of like almost like a gunslinger that just won the showdown. You know, the way he's holstering them, and it's just pure Batman, and it's just like you've been saying, Chris. Like this is just a classic. It just feels like a classic old school comic, but not in a dated or cheesy way. It's just, I don't want to say run of the mill, but or average, because it feels above that because there's so many other things going on. But it's just simple, but that's not necessarily bad.
No, I mean,
it's not just simple, it's complex.
Arguably, I think what it gets at is that it leans into the more regular conventions of Batman storytelling, if that makes sense. But that doesn't mean that it's, badly using all those toys in the toy box. Paul already mentioned giving service to really both sides of Bruce Wayne. Because we get that glimpse of the real Bruce Wayne at the end of the dinner conversation, but we also see the image that he chooses to project to the rest of the world, including to Jezebel at this point in the story. And it uses that very effectively. It's a culmination of the beginning of the run where Bruce has to kind of rebuild his public persona after being gone for a long time and going through some pretty intense craziness in the run up and aftermath of Infinite Crisis. And then when Batman's back in Gotham, you get the true sense that he is someone who is in his element. And there's a degree of comfort and confidence that he has for most of the night up until a very particular point. And that's when things start to get him off balance, literally and figuratively. When he remembers the insanity of the Black Case book. And it cost him.
Can I ask a quick question? What is Jezebel a character that is a prominent in this run?
Yes. She will be.
Because I'll be honest. I mean, obviously, she must be of something because he introduces her. Right? She's a new character, I assume, right?
She showed up first in 656, that pop art museum when the Ninja Man Bats showed up for the first time.
Yeah, okay, all right. But this run is when she first appeared. It's a Grant Morrison character.
Yes.
And if by the way, if you guys are wondering what the heck I'm doing, this is classic me. I bought some library comic books on the internet, and so I'm peeling off the stuff while we're talking, like the barcodes and all that crap. So anyway, Chris, you know me. I'm the ultimate multitasker here. So
I do.
But anyway, but back to Jezebel. The way they've constructed this character, I really liked, and I immediately have already taken a liking to, because it's a it's a rich person like Bruce Wayne that he can relate to. That's not, again, that I know of right now. That is not just like someone he can connect with. It's interesting. Like Grant Morrison writes her very well already, and I've already like taken a liking to her at this point. So,
All right. Well, we'll have to put a pin in that, and we'll come back to it. You're going to be seeing more of her. That's for sure.
I'm trying to think if she showed up in anything else.
Prior to this, you mean?
No, post this. Like, was she in Batwoman in the 3rd season? I don't remember.
Oh, that's a good question. I actually have no idea if she's been adapted.
I don't remember that. Pete's probably seen that show more than I have, so I've seen them all, but it's been a minute. Another little artistic touch. Like, he's still carrying on the funky boot tread that Jim Lee did, which I thought was kind of cool.
That is cool. I like that. And it makes sense, you know. I mean, this is his urban footwear. He needs to have some traction when he's running across those slippery rooftops from all that crazy Gotham rain that just looks so gross most of the time. I love it.
We would know, Chris. We would know.
Well, I mean, Gotham rain looks like it's hot and sticky in a weird way.
Really? I always looked at it as like is not like it was Pacific Northwest, but it was cold, damp rain. Like it was not like a fun rain. It wasn't a humid rain at all.
It depends. I guess it depends on the time of year that I'm reading this, because sometimes they like actually peg when in the year a particular story takes place. But to me, it's always just looked super oppressive, and appropriately so, though, considering where it's falling. So, yeah, this is a pretty fun issue overall. I remember being kind of unsatisfied originally with the abruptness of the cliffhanger.
Okay.
But it doesn't really feel very apt now. And, you know, saying that retrospectively, of course, that's probably why. But when we get into 665, these two issues pair really, really well together. I kind of wish that they had come out in more rapid succession than they did originally, because I was just chomping at the bit for the next one.
Was the next issue delayed?
It wasn't. No, it wasn't. It wasn't delayed. Because they had built in enough time with the Ostrander story. I think that they were able to keep the schedule through to the J.H. Williams issues, which we'll get to in a few issues time. Oh man, that's going to be fun.
Yeah.
But
speaking of Batwoman, wow.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the Black Case book, really.
Yeah.
I mean, we get the Black Case book becomes a little bit more of an overt discussion point for 665, but it really takes off when we get to 667. But we got 666 between now and then too. So there's a lot of really fun stuff to touch on with this. I do want to touch on the critical reception of the time before we start winding this down. Comic Book Revolution, Rock gave this positive marks, but he noted that it is all set up. He said, quote, "This issue was all about the setup. Morrison used this issue to transition from his last story arc and to get all the various players into place for this new story arc. Morrison has certainly piqued my interest in this new arc. Morrison needed this issue with a nice hook ending. We get this faux Bane breaking Batman's back in a nod to the actions of the original Bane. The ending was certainly enough to get the reader excited about the next issue. Andy Kubert did a solid job with the artwork. I've never been a huge Andy Kubert fan, but I certainly respect his talent. I still find Kubert's art
solid job. A solid job.
Just an individual
job, please.
Some of the small panels look a little weak and a bit sloppy. Okay. However, the one-page splash shots are just fantastic looking. So a positive overall. IGN ran 2 reviews of this issue, both advising only to check it as opposed to calling it a must-have or saying that people should pass it or even burn it. Dan Phillips wrote, Yeah, I know, right? The only problem is this issue contains almost none of the manic brilliance we've all come to expect out of Morrison. He begins with an amusing scene of Bruce Wayne on a date with some rich socialite, and then quickly transforms into Batman's investigation of a case involving mutilated prostitutes. As I said earlier, Morrison holds back any of his trademark high concepts and instead remains within the conventions of the typical Batman mystery, which is interesting to see, if not somewhat disappointing.
It's 22 pages. What do you want? Like
I
a 400
Yeah,
page novel?
I would like to see what they thought of this issue after his run was done, and
sure.
if they still felt the same way about those statements that they made.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair because, I mean, taking issue with the fact that it's more conventional than prior issues, it's a take. It's fine, I guess, if you were expecting, a hydrochloric acid trip with every Morrison issue. But I mean, the storytelling is completely intact here, and this issue's work in the wider run certainly becomes evident as time goes on. Last perspective I'll share is the original Batman on Film review from Mr. Bill Ramey. He said, "Gripes? Not many from me, actually. I guess one could say that this story starts off with Bruce Wayne in Gibraltar, and a few pages later, without explanation or continuity, the Batman's in Gotham. I'm of the opinion that there is method to Morrison's madness. He's giving readers a look into Bruce Wayne's life as well as Batman's. If all you want out of Bruce Wayne is to have him sit and brood in a darkened Wayne manor, then yeah, you're probably not going to like Morrison's take on Batman. Frankly, I find this Bruce Wayne and Batman much more interesting." And that was a positive review
Hmm.
from Bill on that one. So this one, yeah, I think the positive overall perspectives on this one were pretty evident, even if it wasn't as engaging, let's say, or certainly controversial as the last issue was. Oh, there you go.
Listen, I'm just licking my hands because I'm trying to get the. Anyway, I'll wash my hands later. I love you, Death Star.
So, I guess what are your guys' final thoughts on Three Ghosts of Batman? Paul, why don't you start us off on final thoughts?
Oh,
Unmute yourself first.
yeah. And you're back to muted.
There we
There you
go.
go.
There we go. There we go.
Speak.
I think that this was a fun brisk issue. It was again not bad because it's brisk, but it was just a fun Batman comic to read. And it's the people for the record. I just want when people read these long runs, when you realize that it's 22 pages and it is a conveyor belt of storytelling that you have to do. And I don't want to say it's filler because it's such an ongoing process that you can just kind of there's a lot more freedom, I would say, in ongoing comic book storytelling than I would say like a TV show when people complain about filler episodes or whatever. And yeah, you can have that in comics, but you can really map things out and draw things out a lot differently than you can in TV. And I think, but you got to remember too that you also have a little bit more of a limiting palette when you have 22 pages to tell your story, and to go and expect like these reviews of like Grant Morrison being like, "Whoa, high concept, blah blah." It's like, dude, you can't. This is a superhero comic book about Batman. You can't expect high concept, literally 22 pages, 12 months a year. It's like that's asking a lot. And not to mention, would get dull after a while, to be quite honest. Because you know what? I want to see Batman beat the shit out of people. Stir it up. Like I don't want high concept all the time. And that's the thing. You want to have action. And the thing about a lot of people, a lot of writers get problems with these superhero comics is they forget the action part. Yeah, I want drama, I want intrigue, I want mystery, I want all that stuff, and have a good writing. But I also want to see Batman put his fist to someone's face, and I want it to look amazing, which Andy Kubert gladly do. And I think the people forget that we want those action scenes in because that's why I read superhero comics in the first place. I loved action scenes. Whenever I look through a comic, first thing I look for is what's the action scene look like. So people who want to be like, high concepts, like, listen, I don't want the clown at midnight every issue. Not just a prose thing, but like the whole idea of like just a bunch of standoff stuff. I want Batman kicking ass. I want rad looking panels. Give me that to me. I'm going to be good for majority of the time. But I laugh at some of these people who want to act like they're critiquing, like, it's like Pitchfork Media back in the early 2000s when I was reading like them being like, this Andrew WK album is so bleh. And then they had to go retroactively call it like a masterpiece because they're so stupid back in the day. It's like, it's crazy. So for me, it's like, know what you're getting into, critique for what it is, not for what it isn't. And I think it's a solid, fun issue.
Well said. Javi.
I mean, I loved it back then, and I love it now, and just for all the reasons that we mentioned. I mean, it's just they're just getting started. Like, they're at the top of their game, but they're just getting started with where the story's going to go. And I feel like these two issues, because like this issue and the next one, they're not as sexy as like some of the named arc stories, or as 666 because of the number and the Damian as Batman story. Like, they just kind of fall to the wayside, and it's really a shame because there's just some great Batman moments. One of my favorite lines from the whole series, I think, is like next issue, I think.
Well,
So,
and Javi, I don't mean to interrupt, Javi, but really
no,
quick,
you're good.
I want to say the covers for these are incredible, and the next issue cover is
Yeah.
God damn, that cover is amazing. So and like I gotta hand it to Grant Morrison. When you introduce the son of Batman, literally the son of Batman, biological son of Batman, and then you go into this, it takes some guts, man. And but there's, as someone who kind of very, very lightly knows what's going on, and I've been really enjoying getting to know everything. It's a really gutsy call what Grant does, and I think obviously land it pretty well. Not saying he like grand slams it all the time, but this is interesting. And like, is it interesting as like introducing the son of Batman for the first time? Maybe not, but to follow it up with something as unique and weird as this, it just shows you the how good Grant is. And I've been just like you guys, I'm loving what I'm reading. So I'm glad we're doing this issue by issue.
Awesome. Yeah, in terms of where I fall on it, I like it a lot, particularly because it is such a great refinement of what we saw from Kubert's earlier work in the issue, and you combine that with the groundwork that's being laid here for what the run is going to be doing over the next year, in terms of published issues. This is really cool, and this is really the first domino to fall into place for RIP in a significant way. And building to that story, it's going to be fun. It's going to be really interesting once all of the preliminary work is out of the way and we actually get to 676. Those are going to be some fun discussions on Knights Never Die, because RIP is a very polarizing story for a lot of people. And
Ryan Lauer.
it's going to be really fun to revisit it. But I mean, the journey until then is an embarrassment of riches. We've got some really incredible comics to talk about between now and then. And I'm looking forward to going on the journey with you, gentlemen. So,
agreed.
Onward and upward. So I think we're pretty much done. I think we're gonna leave it there. This was a really fun issue, and thank you to everybody for checking out this episode of Knights Never Die. Javi, where can people find you?
In so many places, but probably not Twitter. for much longer. An hour before we went live with this, I just dropped another episode of Up to Speed with Wally West on the YouTube channel.
Nice.
So you can check that out, talking about issue 5 of Wally's run. Of course, BatmanOnFilm.com, Batman animation episodes on that YouTube channel. Hopefully within the next week, my unboxing of the Batman 1989 2.0 figure should be going up on the BOF Facebook and the YouTube page. And like I mentioned at the top of this episode, the 007 Files is up on Spotify and Apple, and we just talk about anything and everything James Bond. We go into our personal introductions. We have a 2-parter talking about License to Kill being 35 years old this year. And now we've got a GoldenEye episode. So lots more to come on that, and I'm excited to do it. And here on the Comic Binge, I can't wait to crack open Superman Birthright and reread that for the second time this year and talk about it with you guys.
Yeah.
In person instead of over text.
Right. Next week is going to be, I meant to create that. It's been crazy the last couple of days, obviously, for everybody, but I meant to create the cover art, but next week's episode is going to be a banger. I meant to tell you guys, we have Sean, I always forget how to say his last name, but he used to be on the Legends of Grayskull podcast and Off-World podcast. And he still does it, but he's an artist, super cool dude. He was on the X-Men episodes with me. We did the X-Men 97 kind of prelude stuff a little bit. And we also did like a He-Man episode with him a while back. Super rad dude. I promised him then I'd get him on Birthright. So he's keen to do that. And he's a super rad dude. I'm almost done with Birthright. I started reading it last week, and spoiler alert, I loved it then. I fucking love it now. So it's gonna be, we'll just call next week a love fest. That's all I gotta say. So next week's our countdown to Superman is going to be, it could be an all-timer. I honestly think that it could be, because we're gonna dissect the hell out of that thing, and I think between the 4 of us, we're really gonna like F shit up with that one.
Sounds good to me. As for me, you can follow me on various social media platforms at Chris Clow. Check out Discovery Deeper for Star Trek podcast if you haven't before. We're going to be coming back pretty soon for Star Trek Lower Decks season 5. And of course, be sure to keep it tuned to the Comic Binge for all the great discussions and comics that Paul and I have cooking up for you. Best way to keep in touch, of course.
Hey, Javi.
Like, subscribe, comment, do all of the things that keep you engaged with the show on this platform. And we always appreciate the chance to connect with folks. Next time on Nights Never Die, date to be determined, Batman adds to his list, the Black Casebook rears its head, and the future is considered. But that is going to do it for Nights Never Die for this episode. And until next time, please remember, Robin will never